She didn't say anything when she came in. The door opened. I heard it from the balcony where I had been standing for approximately 4 minutes, pretending to look at the view, and actually deciding whether to request a room change before she arrived, and I heard the suitcase wheels on the tile. And then, quiet. And then the particular sound of a zip being opened with intention. Efficient. Purposeful. The sound of someone who had already decided to make the best of this. I came back inside. She had her suitcase open on the bed nearest the door, and she was lifting things out and placing them with the specific neatness of a person who has a system. And she looked up when I walked in, and she said nothing. Not curtly. It wasn't dismissal. It was simply that she had assessed the situation, arrived at an approach, and was executing it, and the approach did not require a preamble. She unpacked. I watched her for a moment. I went back to my side of the room and I thought, 4 days. 4 days in a shared room with Vivienne Park. I had dealt with worse. I was not immediately certain this was true. My name is Joel Crane. I'm 36. I work as a senior account director at a mid-sized design agency, which means I am responsible for the relationship between the agency and its clients. Which means I spend a great deal of my professional life managing the gap between what people want and what is possible. And occasionally the gap between what people say they want and what they actually want, which is a different skill and a harder one. I have been at the agency for 3 years. I am good at my job. She is also good at hers. This is, in point of fact, the entire problem. Her name is Vivienne Park. She was 33 when she joined the agency 2 years ago as the senior creative director. Same level of seniority, adjacent lane of authority, which in a creative firm means you share resources and credit, and occasionally clients, and never quite agree on any of it. She was precise and fast, and had the specific intelligence of someone who did not need you to know she was the smartest person in the room, because she had already moved on to the next thing while you were still noticing. She wore her hair down when she was relaxed and pinned back when she was working, and after 2 years I could read which one she was in from the lobby, which was information I had not asked for and could not now discard. She had a small silver mechanical pencil she carried everywhere, the kind with a click mechanism that advanced the lead, and she clicked it twice, absently, when she was thinking hard about something, and once, sharply, when she had landed on an answer. I had learned to wait for the once. That pencil was everywhere. That's important. The agency ran an annual offsite, a long weekend at a conference center on the coast, ostensibly for strategy sessions and team building, practically for the kind of conversations that do not happen in offices, because offices have walls and hierarchies and the particular mutual performance of people who are always slightly on display. I had attended 3 of them. They were useful, on balance, and the evenings were genuinely good, and the room assignments had never previously been anything I thought about. This year, the accommodation was a set of sea-facing rooms, doubles, allocated in pairs, and whoever had done the allocation had paired us. I did not know if this was deliberate. I suspected it was deliberate. The agency had a culture of noticing things about its people that the people had not noticed about themselves, and then gently engineering proximity, which I thought was overstepping, and also, historically, not wrong. We had not, in 2 years, ever been alone together for longer than a meeting. We were now going to be alone together in a shared room for 4 days and 3 nights on the Cornish coast in October, which was the kind of circumstance that could go very well or very badly, and there was no moderate outcome available. We were not precisely rivals in the adversarial sense. I want to be clear about this because the word implies conflict, and what we had was subtler and more professional than that. We had disagreements, consistent, genuine, structurally interesting disagreements, The kind where neither party is wrong, but both parties see the problem differently enough that the argument itself produces something the individual positions wouldn't have. In a design agency that runs on the tension between what a client asks for and what will actually work, this kind of productive friction is not a liability. The creative director and the account director are supposed to push against each other. We were, by every professional measure, doing exactly what we were supposed to do. I had come to understand over 2 years that her pushback on my account strategy was always worth examining, because she was looking at things I wasn't looking at, and she was usually right about what she saw. I suspected she had come to a similar understanding about me. We had never said this out loud. The disagreements were more efficient. The thing I had also never said out loud. I had reorganized things, quietly, across 2 years. I stayed in the office later on Thursdays, because she worked late on Thursdays, and the conversations that happened after 6, when the floor thinned out, were different from the conversations that happened before. Less performative, more direct, occasionally about things that had nothing to do with the agency at all. I took the long route past the creative studio on the way to the kitchen because her desk was visible from the corridor, and I had developed, without planning to, an interest in what she was working on that was not entirely professional in its character. I had done all of this with the full conviction that it was professional engagement and not any other kind, and I had been managing this conviction adequately. The off-site changed the mathematics. I told myself we were simply two professionals with a productive tension. I had told myself this for 24 months. I was now going to have to tell myself this in a shared room for 4 days, which was a different test. The first night she set her things on the bedside table with the same system she had used for unpacking, precisely, without ceremony, the mechanical pencil at the exact right angle to the lamp. She changed in the bathroom. I changed in the room because I had been there first and had already decided where I stood on the question of who used the bathroom for what. We ate dinner with the group. We were placed next to each other at the table, which I also suspected was deliberate, and we had the kind of conversation that we always had in meetings, quick, substantive, about a campaign brief that had been presented that afternoon, disagreeing at 2 points and converging at a third. And the person across from us, a junior strategist named Finn, kept looking between us with the expression of someone watching something they had not been told was a sport. We walked back to the room through the evening air that smelled of the sea and dying grass and the particular October cold that is not yet winter, but is finished being autumn. She had her jacket on, and the mechanical pencil was in her pocket, the clip visible over the edge. We had not yet said anything that was not about the work. This felt, across the 10-minute walk, like either a boundary or a bridge, and I was not certain which. At the door she said, "You were right about the media phasing." I stopped. She said it with the same directness she brought to everything. Not softened, not framed, just stated. The way she stated things when she had finished thinking about them and moved to the saying. She was looking at the door, not at me. She had her key in her hand. She said, "In the session. You were right." And I pushed back on the wrong thing. I wanted to say so before tomorrow, when we'd be back in the session room, and it would have the wrong weight. I said, "You weren't wrong about the audience segmentation." She said, "I know. I'm saying you were right about the phasing specifically." I said, "Thank you." She said, "Don't make it odd," and opened the door. I lay in the dark on my side of the room for a longer time than I would like to report, and I thought about the specific rarity of someone who can say you were right without it costing them something visible, without needing to qualify it or balance it or recover from it. She had said it at a closed door in the evening, privately, where nothing professional was at stake. and nothing could be gained from it. She had said it because it was true, and she had decided to say true things. I filed this under professional integrity. The file was thin, and I knew it. The second day had a strategy session in the morning and a walk along the cliff path in the afternoon, paired for the walk the same way we'd been paired for the room, which at this point I had stopped questioning and started accepting as the operational reality of the offsite. The path was narrow in parts, and the wind was coming off the sea with the particular authority of coastal October wind. And she walked with the same unhurried attention she brought to everything, looking at things properly, pausing when something was worth pausing for, not performing enjoyment, but actually having it. The session in the morning had been good, better than last year's, with a clearer argument in the room and a better outcome by the end, and she had presented a framework that I had disagreed with at first, and come around to across 40 minutes, which was the usual pattern, and which I had stopped resisting because her thinking generally earned the 40 minutes. Walking the cliff path in the afternoon had a different quality from the morning strategy room, the way all post-session hours do when the work has gone well, lighter. Easier, the kind of ease that comes from having done something difficult together. Halfway along, she stopped and looked at the sea for a moment. Then she said, "I don't come to the coast enough." I said, "Nor do I." She said, "You grew up near water, didn't you? Someone mentioned it." I said, "Southampton." "Yes." She said, "Does it still feel like home when you see it?" I said yes, without thinking. Which meant it was true, and I had not decided whether to say it. She nodded once and looked at the sea again, and neither of us said anything for a minute. The wind was cold. The path was narrow. We were standing close together in the practical way of two people sharing a narrow path in strong wind, and she had her jacket pulled up, and her hair was doing something the wind had decided on rather than she had, and I was aware of the proximity in a way I had not been aware of things in a long time, not with any particular discomfort, but with a clarity I had been successfully avoiding for 24 months. She clicked the pencil. Once, sharp, the once. She didn't say what she had decided. She started walking again. I walked beside her. I thought about the once for the rest of the afternoon. The third night was when something shifted. There had been drinks with the group after dinner. Easy, relaxed. The kind of evening where the professional edges soften without dissolving, and we had stayed later than most. Not by design, but by the accumulation of a conversation that kept finding new things to be about. The last of the group left around 11. We stayed. When the bar had emptied to the two of us, and the barman who had stopped asking if we wanted anything and was simply waiting with admirable patience, we came back to the room. She sat on the end of her bed with her shoes off and the pencil in her hand. I was at the window, the sea dark and constant outside. We had kept talking, not about work, but about other things, the kind that come out later in evenings when the professional context has receded enough to leave room for the actual person. A book she was reading that had annoyed her productively, she said, which was her description of a book that was wrong about something important in an interesting enough way to be worth finishing. A project I had worked on before the agency that I rarely discussed because it had not gone well in the way that teaches you something rather than simply going badly. She told me something about why she had left her previous firm, which she had not said to anyone at the agency in 2 years. I knew, because I would have heard it by now if she had. The agency being the kind of place where things get around, and she told it without drama, as a simple sequence of events, with the matter-of-fact delivery of someone who has finished being upset about something and is now simply in possession of it. I listened in the way I had learned to listen when she was talking, fully, without preparing an answer. Because she did not need an answer. She needed a room that could hold what she was saying. This was a thing I had understood about her around month 6, and it had changed the way I listened to other people too, which told me something about her I had not examined until now. At some point she said, without looking at me, "Do you think the pairing was deliberate?" I said, "Yes." She said, "So do I." She clicked the pencil twice. Then she said, "Are you angry about it?" I said no. She looked at me then. The room was lit only by the bedside lamp on her side, which meant the light was on her and I was in the darker half of the room, and she was looking at me with the full attention she gave things she had decided to understand, not the strategy session attention, not the creative brief attention, but the other kind, the one I had seen on the cliff path when she asked about Southampton. "Neither am I," she said. I moved from the window. I sat on the end of my bed, facing her, and the room was quiet, and the sea was outside, and there was something in the air that had been building across 4 days and 3 nights of a shared room and a narrow cliff path, and you were right about the phasing set at a closed door. "Viv," I said. "I know," she said. I know," she said again, quietly. "I've been watching you stay late on Thursdays for 8 months. I work late on Thursdays, Joel," I noticed. Something in my chest shifted. "Not dramatically, just enough. You can say nothing," she said. She set the pencil on the bedside table with the particular care she gave it. "We have 1 more day, and then we go back, and this room doesn't exist anymore. And the office is the office. I'm not. I'm giving you that. It's real." She was holding the door open, sitting on the end of her bed in October, on a coast that smelled of sea and grass, giving me the door with both hands and the pencil set down, and the lamp on her side of the room. "I don't want the office version," I said. "I've been doing the office version for 2 years and I'm not good enough at it anymore." She looked at me. "The long route past the creative studio," she said. "Past my desk." "Yes," I said. "I rerouted my walk to the kitchen," she said, "so I could see your office. 6 months ago. I told myself it was faster." She looked at the pencil. "It is not faster." That sentence did something quiet to the room. I moved from my bed to hers in the way that felt like the most natural thing I had done in 2 years, which it was. Because I had been doing the complicated version for 2 years, when this was the simple one. I sat beside her. She didn't move away. She looked at me in the specific way she had been looking at me all week. The full attention, the nothing held back, and she said, "I was right about the audience segmentation." "You were right about the audience segmentation," I said. "I wanted that on the record," she said. "It's on the record." She kissed me, precise, direct, entirely decided, the way she did everything. And when she pulled back, she had the pencil in her hand again, which she had not consciously picked up, and she looked at it and set it down again, which was the most human thing I had ever seen her do. Outside, the sea was doing what the sea does at night on a Cornish coast in October, which is to say it was very present and not asking permission. Inside, the room was warm, and the lamp was on her side, and I was on her side too now, and 2 years of professional distance had become, in the last 4 days, the wrong measurement entirely. 3 months later, the route to the kitchen had been publicly rerouted by both of us into something that required no strategic justification. The mechanical pencil lived on the desk they had given her, which was visible from the corridor I no longer pretended not to walk down. Finn, the junior strategist from the dinner table, had told me with great satisfaction that he had known at the offsite. Specifically, he said, during the campaign argument, when I had conceded a point while simultaneously proving I was right about something else. I told him that was very perceptive. He said he knew. 8 months later, the agency ran the off-site again. The room assignment came out. We were paired again. She saw it before I did and sent me a message that said, "Deliberate, obviously," and then, "Same side of the room as last time?" I said yes. She sent back a single click of the mechanical pencil emoji. She had found it specifically, because she was that kind of person, and nothing else. 2 years later, when people at the agency asked about us, and people asked, because two senior people with a well-documented professional tension becoming a well-documented personal warmth is the kind of thing an agency notices and then discusses at some length. She told the version with the unpacking. She said, "I came in, and he was on the balcony pretending to look at the view, and I decided the most useful thing was to simply get on with it." And then she said, quietly, as an addendum, which was the way she said the things that mattered, "I had decided on the balcony before I got to the room. I saw the light was on through the window. I decided then. Nothing important had appeared overnight. It had simply stopped hiding." What would you have done if you were paired with your professional rival for 4 days in a shared room, and by the third night it turned out you'd both been taking the long route past each other's desks? And have you ever called something professional interest for so long that you ran out of the word entirely? Tell me in the comments. If you liked this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.